As of right now, there are, I believe, 5 different kinds of SAAs. There's the Likert, the single select, the multi-select, ranking, and the polling. The 2 most popular would be probably the Likert and the polling. I'll take you through all of those, or if we have enough time, which I would. Um, this is the content types dashboard on our inside page. This houses a lot of information for all of our activities, including the See Now and the See homework for branching and media quiz, which we went over a couple days ago. This information can be found here, and each one of the SAAs has its own set of instructions, guidelines, and I will take you through some of those, mainly just the templates. Okay, so first let's start out with the Likert type. On the guidelines here, there's a Word doc. It's a much more detailed version. It'll go through every cell, what it does, all the information for it. It also goes over file naming convention and all that other stuff. So let me take you into MindTap right now, and we'll look at one of these. This is the Likert SAA. Basically just for a student to get presented some questions and see what's, and they will assess which they fall under using the Likert scale. The activity metadata tab, that just houses the ISBN, the title information, the author, and all of that good information. But the 3 tabs that we will be focusing on are what is used to build the actual activity. So on the self-assessment page 1, you will see the title, the footnote, the introduction, and the instructions. And all of these you will see in MindTap on this activity. So you'll see the title here. We'll go here, and there's your title. There's the introduction, like in the template, instructions, and here's all your questions and the Likert scale. And here's the footnote, which not all SAAs have footnotes, just depending on the source content. Okay. So this is pretty straightforward. You'll have your title of your SAA, the footnote information, the introduction information, the instructions information. And here is the Likert scale. It's these are the labels, which each label needs to be unique, and there needs to be a label for each score. So if this was blank and it had a score of 2, that would throw an error in the transform, and it would mess up the activity. So for each label, there needs to be a score. And here are where you will enter your questions. And the group numbers, which they're in the guidelines here. Give you a little more detail on that. The group number breaks down each question. Say these questions are in group 2, therefore group 2 will be, those answers will be blocked into this group, and each student will get a different interpretation based on the points they scored in the first page. Okay. And if you notice, one of the things that I will caution you with, when we click on each of these cells that have these information, you will see each one has a different label up here in this name box, like SAA title, SAA footnote. It is really crucial that when filling out these templates that we keep these cell properties intact. Say if I delete a cell, I really want to caution not to delete cells or remove rows while filling out these tiles. Just make sure you delete the content inside the cell, not the actual cell itself. So if I delete a row, now we're starting out at question 2 here, and that's going to get the properties of these cells because these are attached to question 2 as well. I really want to caution not to do any removing of these cell properties. The rule of thumb is if you're copying and pasting from a different Excel document, I would, when you copy it, I would open up a notepad and copy that information into the notepad first to make sure you're not bringing over any cell properties from the other document, and then I would copy the information again and then paste it into the new template. What this cell does, the score flipped, say for this question, if I mark an X in here, that will notify the transform that we want to flip the scale here. So for this particular question on the back end, it will score it as 1 and 0 versus 0 and 1 that it is for all the other questions. So that pretty much covers the first tab here, the self-assessment tab. All this information transfers over here into the actual activity. So a student will go through and mark their answers, and then they'll click the Finish Self-Assessment. And there will, the student will actually see some sort of analytics, which is really prompted from this page, the interpretation page. They will get either these pockets of information judged on how they scored their activities. Actually, we'll see some results. The analytics will show like a scale of what their answers choose and how it stacks up to the other students that have taken the quiz. And after they look over that stuff, they have the opportunity to adjust their questions again. They want to adjust their answers. And if they do some adjustments, they can continue on. And then it prompts with a quiz. Not all SAAs will have a quiz portion, and the quiz portion is actually in the template as well. It's only referencing a Word doc. So if a SAA has a quiz at the end of it, or it requests a quiz at the end of it, there will be an actual Word doc attached with, need to be attached with this Excel template. It'll be just your standard true-false, multiple choice kind of quiz, and that information can be found in the content types dashboard if you're to format just your normal multiple choice, true-false, fill-in-the-blank kind of questions. Those will be done in a Word doc, and they're completely separate from the transform. Those will be done separately. So if we are given a quiz, say this one has 3 questions, in the template, you will put the information, you'll put the file name for the actual quiz document and the number of questions that it contains. So in this case, it would be 3, since there are 3 questions. And the student takes the quiz. I'll just go ahead and randomly take it. And after they submit, they get feedback if they were correct, incorrect, and stuff. And then they can submit the self-assessment for grading. I will caution, though, if there is, a lot of the times there aren't a quiz attached with these, it's just the self-assessment portion. If that is the case when you're filling out these templates, if there's no quiz requested, we'll just put NA for the file name, and we'll just put 0 for the number of questions. I kind of skipped over this tab. This is the interpretation tab. This is what happens on the interpretation tab inside the activity. This is where at the very top, you'll see this information, this self-assessment measures how likely, so on. And then it'll actually, it'll show the results of what the scores are for the answers of how the student answered it. So if it got a score of 2, then it'll say your score for group expectancy theory was 2, and it'll give them this dialogue here, you are not likely, etc. And that is Likert. There will be another tab here, the revision history. You don't need to worry about that. That's just part of the actual template. There's nothing that would need to be filled out there. Actually, I wanted to bring up the file name. In the guidelines for all these self-assessments, there will be, down here at the bottom, there's a file name convention. And here's this one. It's usually just the ISBN of the title, the author, SAA, Likert, and then CH, the double-digit chapter number. In some cases, there will be multiple chapter numbers for each, or there'll be multiple SAAs for a chapter. And in those cases, you'll just, the first one will be chapter 5, and then the second file will be chapter 5A, and so on and so forth. And these will be pretty much the same for all of the SAAs. for polling, we'll change the Likert to polling. This is very helpful for us because while we're transforming, it actually takes this information here and creates our file names based on the double-digit chapter number. So it's very nice to follow these along for us, and it's very beneficial just to keep that in note. And you can find the guidelines here inside of the content type dashboard on the inside. This is the Likert questionnaire here, and then down here the self-assessment authoring guidelines. And you'll see the empty template and the completed template and a lot of other notes. Well, that's the Likert one. That's probably the most popular one that we get. Now we will move on to the single select self-assessment. Now, a lot of these are going to be very similar. The interpretation tabs especially are going to be very similar. They're just different variations on what kind of self-assessment. Here you'll see, just like in the other one, the title, the footnote, the introduction, and you got your same tabs down here. The activity metadata that just houses the title's information. But this is different as in it's pretty much like a quiz itself, like a multiple choice quiz. It'll have these questions, and I believe it can be up to 15 questions. And let me open it and show you how it looks inside of the 9 tab. Single select. And here's your title. Here's the introduction, the instructions, information like it is in the footnote will be at the bottom if the source content calls for it. And see how this one looks different. There's no Likert scale. It's just pretty much a basic quiz. So the student will go through, answer the questions. Finish the self-assessment. And just like the other one, they'll get an analytics page that will have the information from this tab, which is exactly like it is in the other one. It'll have the title, it'll have the same title, I do believe, and it also has this information at the top, and then it'll show the groups and their information based on what their answers were. Then they'll have the opportunity to change their questions if they like, or change their answers, and then they can move on to the quiz portion of it, just like in the other one. This is under the quiz tab, and it'll be just the quiz file name, that's the Word doc, and how many questions are in each one. And again, if this one won't call for a quiz sometimes, therefore you would put NA and 0, if that's the case. So the student, after they take the self-assessment portion, they'll finish with the quiz, answer the questions, submit the quiz, and then they'll get their results. So it's very similar to the Likert scale, except for there's no, it's not a mostly true or a strongly dislike. It's not like an opinion thing. It's just several questions and they go through. It's like the Likert, depending on the answers, but it's basically laid out as an actual quiz versus the scalable version. You'll see that this is the case for a lot of these. They're going to be very similar format. You'll have the self-assessment portion, the interpretation, the experiment, and the quiz, and the review. And these will be named the same as in the file name, except for it'll be, in this case, it'll be single select. They all follow the same file naming convention. With this one, just like the Likert and all the other SAA templates that we're going to see, I really stress to not delete rows or delete cells because it will affect the outcome of the activity because each one of these has their own cell properties, just like in the Likert one. And that is the single select. Now we'll move on to the multi-select. And this one is it's a little different. It's not like a question-answer kind of thing. It's just an overall instruction, and it asks you to select 10 items or 5 items, depending on how you want to, how many is requested in the template. Again, we have the activity metadata, the self-assessment page, the interpretation, and the quiz tabs down here. For this one, we get our title, our footnotes, our introduction, our instructions, and our question. It shouldn't be empty, but I'll just go and put question there. And here you'll, the selection limit, that ranges what you want, how many you want the students to select of this list here. So you will just put in all your responses, and each one can have its own separate group. And your selection limit of 10 will produce this kind of result. You have your title, your instructions, and it would have a question underneath that, and the student can go through and select 10 of these, depending on what each student feels. And then they finish the self-assessment, and again, it'll bring up with some sort of analytics, and it'll be on just like in the other ones. It'll have the interpretation here, and then it gives them the results depending on what the student selected. And then after that, they have the chance to go back and edit their answers based on what they saw in the analytics. They don't want to change anything. It'll take them to a quiz portion, just like in the other ones we saw. And I've been saying that a lot of the requests we get don't request a quiz to go with this. And if that's the case, you will just see the self-assessment, the interpretation, the experiment, and then it goes straight to review. So in this case, they have the students prompted with a quiz, and they finish the quiz, and they get their feedback from the quiz question. And just like with the other ones, this will have the quiz tab where you will fill in your quiz file name and the number of questions. And again, if no quiz is requested, we'll go with NAA and 0. So this one's very similar to the other ones, but this one's a little more different with how it's not a question and answer kind of thing. It's one question at the top asking you to select all the options, and you go through a checklist and select which ones are more for you kind of thing. And this will follow the naming convention as the other ones were. Instead of Likert or polling it, this will be multi-select. Okay, we'll move on to the ranking SAA. This one's probably the least popular we see come through, and this one's probably the most different from the other ones. Just like the other ones, we have our self-assessment tab, our interpretation tab, our quiz tab, metadata tabs. And we have our title, our footnote, our introduction, our instructions. And we also have this kind of looks like the multi-select, or the single select with the quiz or the questions in different columns here. But with these, we have we get like our own little list of options here per question. And each has a different score, a different group number, and each has a label. I'll show you how this looks here. It's kind of, your labels are least like you and most like you, and they're put above the empty space here, and you'll drag the actual options and move them in an order that is least like you to most like you. And the labels can change per template as what they want to be, whatever the instructor wants them to be here. This is different from most of the other essays, how each question it's pretty much like an ordered list kind of thing. So the student goes through, puts their order for all the questions, and then they'll finish the self-assessment. And just like the other ones, it'll bring it up into an interpretation page where they will get this information, and they'll get, depending on what they chose and the order they put them in, they'll get what group they were under and what their score for each group was. And they'll get the opportunity to modify their answers if they'd like after seeing the analytics portion of what their score or their answers stack up to everybody else's. They can update theirs, continue on, and then it'll prompt another quiz at the end. And it doesn't necessarily have to have a quiz. It's just this one required a quiz. And after you submit, you get your information. And the quiz tab is just like the other ones, the quiz file name, the number of questions in there. And if none is requested for this title, it would be NA and 0. Like I said, a lot of these are going to be very similar, especially with the headings, the title, and then the interpretation tabs. They're very similar with the self-assessment than the interpretation and the quiz. They all follow the same kind of guideline. And the file name, just like the other ones, will be instead of multi-select or Likert, it's going to be ranking. This will bring us to our final self-assessment, which is the polling. This one is also very popular. This, along with the Likert, is probably our two most popular essays that we see come through. And this one's a little different. All right, we have our activity metadata title, but here we're going to have different tabs below. Instead of just our self-assessment page 1 and interpretation and quiz, we're actually going to have polling page 1, polling page 2, polling page 3, and interpretation. Now, we won't worry about the controlled values tab. This one's a new tab below, but it's nothing for you to need to fill in. It's just there because there's a controlled value that has a drop-down list here. The empty tablet. See that while you're filling this out, you fill out the question. You'll have text here that says text, and what kind of type this is would be text/XML. Or if you had a video, you would put the video file path here, like the wowza path. And then we would select video/MP4 for the type. Or there's also image. And there we would put the image path and the image file name in here. And this information will actually show up above the question here. So this one has an image. And after the title, the introduction, the instructions, it actually has an image for the student to look at before it answers the quiz, answers the question below. So for this one, there's an image. Here's the question, the instructions. This one kind of looks like the Likert with the labels and the scoring, but it's just kind of the options for the question here, like A and B for this one. And this one falls under group 3. And you can have up to 3 pages here, and I'll show you what it looks like. We have our quiz. We'll take this one, and you hit next, and it just prompts the second question. And it goes through, we'll get requests for just one page, where the second page is blank and the third page is blank. They just want the one question. That's allowed. That happens very frequently. But you can have up to 3 pages of information here. And that prompts the student with 3 questions, and they can go back and forth before they submit. Hit next. And last one. And then they'll finish their self-assessment. Here's a little different because not necessarily on this page, but they'll get an analytics page here. And that's just like our interpretation on our other one, except for this one has its own title. You can describe the title for this. It'll have the scoring interpretation text at the top, and then they'll get their results shown to them with a little scale based on what they chose. But what's different is with polling, there is no quiz at the end. There won't be a quiz doc. There won't be prompts for any questions at the end after taking the self-assessment. With polling, it's the only SAA that does not give the option to prompt for a quiz at the end of the template or the end of the activity. One of the things I want to stress with polling, yes, you want to keep the cell properties just like the other ones, but with polling, you have your 3 different tabs here for each question. If there are multiple questions, and it's not just one page and the last 2 blank, the title at the top of each needs to be unique, because when we transform it, if it's the same exact thing, it's going to overwrite, and it's going to lump everything into the kind of the same group, and it's going to cause some confusion. So just to make note that you'll want the title for each polling tab to be unique. I'll show you, this is an example of a single page. So if this one only has the one page, say you fill out this information, and it's only for this one page, you'll get a result like this. And this one actually has a video. So the student will watch the video, and after the video finishes, they'll answer the question below, and then they'll finish the self-assessment. There's no next or previous button because there's only one page. And that is all of the SAA activities.